Let's talk about free speech a bit. You know, you call yourself a free speech absolutist. You want Twitter, and this is
aspirationally.
Aspirationally, you want Twitter to be as truthful as possible, most accurate source of information about the world. So what does that mean for how you police lies on the platform? You mentioned community notes. Is that the extent of it?
I think community notes, yeah. I mean, I'd say, so my overall kind of vision for X or Twitter is to be a cybernetic collective mind for humanity. This is going to sound quite esoteric and sci-fi, but if you know, in pursuit of that objective, you want to have information move quickly, have that information be accurate, and you want to have error correction on that information. So you can think of community notes as like an error correction on information in the network.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about fact-checking today, which is something that liberals and Democrats and progressives don't seem to like anymore now that it has been turned against them, right? We're at the point now in politics where, like I tell you guys, everything comes full circle, okay? These people wanted to literally fact-check everything that came out of President Trump's mouth, out of Republicans' mouth, and they didn't even fact-check it correctly. What they did was that they would try to do a very obscure and very specific fact check so that anything that, you know, a Republican or President Trump said that wasn't 100% aligned with the parameters that they've set, the very specific parameters that they set for the fact check, then they just say it's false, right? And that's what they did, okay? And they have abused this so-called fact checking for years against President Trump and the Republican Party. However, now with the purchase of Twitter, fact-checking has now been turned back around against them with the community notes feature. And again, a lot of people on the left, they're now seeing fact-checking as a right-wing tool, right? Fact-checking is now a right-wing thing. Because again, they've put themselves in a position where now everything has to be fact-checked because this is what they wanted, right? This is the precedent that they set. And that brings me to the cackling hens on The View, right? More specifically, probably the dumbest and loudest cackling hen, the most racist cackling hen, Sunny Hostin, who got fact-checked in real time as she was trying to smear Elon Musk in regards to him using Twitter Spaces to allow presidential candidates, like, for example, Ron DeSantis, to launch their campaigns. And she tried to basically talk about how unpopular Elon Musk is, except he's actually more popular than her Lord and Savior, Joe Biden, and she was shocked to find out about that in real time. Take a look.
You know, 20% of Americans, or only 20% of Americans are on Twitter. And out of those 20%, 80% are the loudest and the ones that make the most noise. And so you're hearing from such a small group of people. And when you compare a Twitter announcement with Elon Musk, who I don't know what his approval rating is, but it's like in the toilet, 40...
You know what it is.
He's at, oh, I'm sorry. I was just told he's more favorable than Biden and Trump, which scares me. But so it's 47%. But when you compare that, right? When you compare that to Joe Biden's video that when he announced, which was, "I'm here to save the soul of a nation," I think so many people felt that and related to it.
Yeah. So you seen that? You heard that? The dumbest cackling hen ever, Sunny Hostin, was shocked to find out that Elon Musk is actually more popular, more favorable than her Lord and Savior, Joe Biden, who probably is the most unpopular president in history, okay? Because he's probably been one of the worst presidents that we've ever had in the history of this country, which is really saying something, okay? The guy's been absolutely terrible, okay? But again, what she found out the hard way is that she's not actually in touch with reality, or, you know, most people in this country, as somebody like Elon Musk, who in my opinion represents the moderate in this country, okay? People like Elon Musk, he's not necessarily on the left or the right. He's simply in the middle. He's independent. And I think he sways either way based off the current situation in the country, which is how most people work, right? That's how most people work. But again, she can't fathom somebody like Elon Musk, who they have falsely painted as a white supremacist. He's a far-right white supremacist, and they definitely don't like the fact that he's working with DeSantis. She can't fathom him being more popular, more liked than, again, her Lord and Savior, Joe Biden. It's absolutely incredible. Another situation where Democrats are getting a shock in regards to reality and where the American people stand is on the issue of the debt ceiling and debt, okay, and our spending, okay, as I think Americans have realized due to inflation that our spending has been out of control and that this is not a good thing for our country or for the economy. And the Democrats and Republicans are currently negotiating, right, on the debt ceiling and whether or not they're going to get a deal in order to allow the country to continue to pay its bills or risk going into default, which would be an economic disaster, not just for the country, but for the world as a whole, okay? Because we have to pay our bills. We have to pay what we owe to people, and we need to authorize the government to do that. However, Republicans are saying, look, we also have to cut spending, and the Biden administration needs to come to the table, okay, to negotiate with us and propose something, right, so that we can actually get a deal done, okay? However, the Democrats have refused to do that, as they made it very clear over the past few months leading up to this that they don't want to negotiate on the debt ceiling at all. They just want to raise it and not compromise, but at the same time, they're blaming Republicans for not doing anything about the debt ceiling or the debt crisis, while at the same time not proposing any legislation or, again, being interested in negotiating. And you have Biden, who's been taking vacation after vacation while supposedly negotiating with the Republicans. But again, somehow this is all the Republicans' fault and they haven't done anything. It's truly fascinating to watch. Take a look.
So on the debt ceiling, you used words like catastrophic and devastating today. But the president, again, is going to Camp David this weekend and then going to Delaware. If the situation is so dire, then why is the president?
Well, I already answered that question. So you have another one?
More specific.
I literally just answered that question.
He came back from Japan.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No.
Any other question?
No, that's it.
Okay, great. So keep going. Go ahead.
We don't see any negotiation here. We don't see anything that needs to be discussed. It's pretty simple and it's pretty straightforward. We believe that Congress has a constitutional duty to get this done. The president's stance on negotiation stands, right, which is he does not believe, as it relates to the debt ceiling, that we should be negotiating. We've been very clear. We're not going to negotiate on the debt ceiling. He never came to the table to negotiate on the debt ceiling. That was not something that occurred. That is not something that's happening. We've been very clear. We're not negotiating around the debt ceiling. When you think about the debt limit, it is not negotiable. We should not be negotiating on the debt ceiling. There's no negotiation that we will be having. The debt ceiling, it should be done without negotiation. There should be no negotiation. This should be done without conditions. We should not have to negotiate on this. Look, we've been very clear. We're not going to negotiate. We're just not going to negotiate on that. As the president said yesterday, he's happy to meet with Speaker McCarthy, but not on whether or not the debt limit gets extended. That is not negotiable, and we have been very clear about this. The president said he's happy to meet with McCarthy, but not on whether or not the debt limit gets extended. That's not negotiable. He is not going to negotiate on the debt ceiling. Been very clear. That is not going to change. I mean, we've been very clear. There shouldn't be negotiations. This is not negotiable. We are not going to negotiate. There's no negotiating around the debt limit.
Yeah, so Democrats are not negotiating around the debt limit, but yet they are blaming Republicans if nothing gets done. Again, it's fascinating. It's so stupid, right? It's so dumb and contradictory that even the mainstream liberal media is calling out some of the Democrats on their nonsense and saying, well, are you guys actually really willing to risk economic catastrophe because you don't want to negotiate with the Republicans on the debt ceiling, who simply are proposing common sense spending cuts? And let's just say they're not really taking it too well when they get these questions, as again, it brings up more contradictions in regards to whether or not the Democrats are actually interested in negotiating or if they're negotiating with the Republicans at all. Take a look.
They are willing to tank it. No. Sorry. That is exactly the problem, is when the media reports this as not their fault. And I'm just going to say, I know so many of you, I have so much respect for what you do, but let's tell the truth here. We are not tanking anything. The debt ceiling has been raised because we have an appropriations process, and during the appropriations process, the budget process, we negotiate. The Republicans can try to get whatever they can there, but then we agree. No, this is important. The American people should hear this. Then we agree on spending. Republicans agree, Democrats agree. We decide, we appropriate money based on what Congress has passed, legislation that we pass in this body. That is democracy. And then, when it's time, the debt ceiling is raised to accommodate what we have already passed, Republicans and Democrats, in a democratic process.
Yeah, so again, it's just hilarious because the Biden administration has told us for months, hey, we don't want to negotiate on this, right? And then when the media asks Democrats, okay, well, so you're willing to let the country default, right? You're willing to risk catastrophe. No, we're not. It's the Republicans' fault, right? It's like, well, Republicans actually have proposed legislation. Where's your legislation? We don't have any legislation, right? But it's the Republicans' fault. And what's even more hilarious about this, speaking of fact checks, right? That's what this video is about. CNN actually fact checked Premier John Paul, who went on CNN this morning to discuss this issue of debt ceiling negotiations. And again, she was presented with a poll showing that the American people overwhelmingly agree with the GOP's solution here in regards to raising the debt ceiling, but also having spending cuts attached to it, which is exactly what they're proposing. And again, Pramila Jayapal didn't handle facts too well here. Take a look.
I think that if we default, if we come close to default, there is only one person to blame, and it's Speaker McCarthy. He says Speaker McCarthy wanted to talk back in February, but don't forget that it wasn't until the end of April that the Republicans even passed a bill off the floor. And let's not be fooled into thinking that that was a budget. It was not a budget. In fact, they've pulled back all of their appropriations bills this week because there is no way to square for the American people what they're saying in terms of they want to increase Pentagon spending, they want to hold veterans harmless, even as they are pulling money away from veterans for the Burn Pit Fund, which, helps people who were injured in war. And if you do all of that, Poppy, there's no way to not have significant cuts to health care, to school and education, to people's child care, Social Security. All of these things will be affected, and they don't want people to know that, but that's what would happen, cuts of between 20 and 30% to all of these different categories that people rely on.
New poll out, I'm sure you've seen it in just the last 2 days, and what it shows, really interestingly, is that 60% of Americans say Congress should only raise the debt ceiling if it comes with spending cuts at the same time, and that includes 58% of independents. Is your position out of step now, Congresswoman, with the majority of the American people?
I'm so glad you raised that poll, because I think it's really important to look at what that poll says. If you just say to people, should we cut spending? They will probably say yes. However, if you say, would you rather cut spending and reduce the deficit by cutting the tax breaks to the wealthiest corporations and wealthiest individuals, or would you like to cut your own health care, education, care for veterans, etc., I guarantee you that you would have even higher numbers that say, let's make sure that we're making the wealthy pay their fair share.
That's not
and
what
that's the other thing we've been saying to the Republicans.
The poll says. This is the exact question that was asked of voters. What should Congress do on the debt ceiling? Raise only if spending cut? 60%. Raise no matter what? 24%. Not raise, let U.S. default? 15%. These are what they are saying to this critical question. Go ahead.
No, I understand. But, Poppy, you can't take tax cuts out of spending.
Yeah, so I love this Democrat talking point that I actually heard in college, right? I took a public policy course 101. I'll never forget this, okay? Because it kind of blew my mind the first time I heard this in college. Again, this professor that was teaching this class clearly was overwhelmingly a far leftist, right? She said that tax cuts are spending in disguise, right? Tax cuts are spending in disguise. And this is how they try to frame this issue, right? Because they believe that your money belongs to the government by default, okay? And if the government is letting you have more of your own money, therefore the government is spending money, right? When, again, you're assuming that your money belongs to the government, and that's just not true. My money belongs to me, right? The American people's money belongs to us. So if the government is basically cutting taxes, okay, that's not more spending because that money belonged to me in the first place, okay? The government is actually robbing me of my money, and that's a problem, right? So don't say and try to act like the government is spending more money because they're not taking more of my money. That's ridiculous, right? Spending is spending, okay? Spending is the government saying, hey, I'm going to take the taxpayers' money and then we're going to, spend it on these programs, right? AKA like, send it to Ukraine and stuff like that. That is what spending is, right? Spending is spending, right? But like I said, the Democrats are frustrated with the media because the Democrats have put themselves in a very, very, very tough position to get out of because they spent months saying that, hey, we're not negotiating on this. We're not negotiating on this. And Republicans have actually proposed a solution that a majority of the American people agree with. So now they're upset. They're mad because the media is calling them out and saying, well, you guys don't really have a solution. And it seems like you guys are just going to let the country default, despite the fact that you claim that you're supposed to be pro-democracy, but you're not actually doing what the people want you to do, which is to increase the debt ceiling, right? And to cut spending, right? That's what the American people want, 60%, right? But yet again, they want to blame the Republicans because they refuse to do anything, right? It's just absolutely amazing how it works, okay? Democrats really believe voters are stupid, and this is a prime example of that. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.